Right now, somewhere in the world, a grown adult is pouring a glass of cold white milk. Biologically speaking, this seemingly ordinary action represents one of the strangest behaviors any mammal has ever displayed.
Every mammal on Earth completely loses the ability to digest milk entirely after passing through early infancy.
Their bodies immediately stop producing the crucial enzyme needed for processing lactose once weaning is finally finished.
However, certain human groups carry a unique genetic mutation that appeared just a few thousand years ago.
For most of human history, drinking milk as adults was completely abnormal and remained an evolutionary accident. This incredible biological accident ultimately transformed the trajectory of massive civilizations by actively altering our human genome. It heavily influenced global public health, helped build enormous empires, and became highly controversial worldwide over time. The actual origin story of milk begins long before early humans ever considered domesticating wild farm animals.
For hundreds of thousands of years, the primal relationship between humans and large mammals involved relentless hunting.
Sometimes hunters succeeded and families feasted, but frequently the fierce beast won those incredibly dangerous ancient encounters. Approaching a wild aurochs, the massive horned ancient ancestor of modern cattle, was considered completely suicidal behavior. Weighing over 2,000 pounds, these aggressive ancient beasts were certainly never gentle or compliant farm animals. They were incredibly territorial, explosively fast, built like armored trucks, and absolutely nobody ever tried milking them.
However, everything drastically changed roughly 12,000 years ago inside the historic region called the Fertile Crescent.
This sweeping arc of ancient land stretched directly from modern Iraq down into both Israel and Jordan.
As the final ice age ended, global temperatures rose, glaciers retreated, and lush new green grasslands expanded. As human nomads finally settle near reliable fresh water sources, a new era unfolds along the majestic Tigris River. These humans started intentionally planting valuable crop seeds and securely storing their harvested grain inside clay pits. Slowly, over consecutive generations, they began successfully capturing and systematically breeding much smaller, notably calmer wild animals. Seeking beasts easier to safely manage, ancient humans likely domesticated their very first wild goats early on.
These adaptable goats ate almost anything and reproduced quite rapidly, with manageable sheep following very shortly afterward.
Centuries later, farmers finally bred those massive and terrifying aurochs down into easily managed domestic farm cattle.
Initial motivation for keeping these animals focused strictly upon acquiring fresh meat, warm hides, and bone tools.
Nobody considered milking them because ancient adults completely lacked the physiological ability to safely digest raw milk.
Consuming raw dairy would instantly cause extreme bloating, terrible cramps, and intensely severe digestive distress without fail.
After early childhood weaning, human bodies permanently stopped producing the enzyme required for breaking down complex lactose.
To the finest grapes and the best company in the village.
Hear, hear! May we share many more meals like this.
However, this strict biological limitation was unexpectedly about to change forever through a remarkably clever accidental discovery.
Around 7,000 years ago, clever humans finally discovered a transformative process that reshaped their entire society.
Leaving fresh milk sitting directly inside warm clay pots allowed natural environmental bacteria to begin multiplying rapidly. These hungry bacteria effectively broke down problematic lactose sugars and converted everything straight into safe lactic acid.
The soured liquid thickened into early yogurt, allowing intolerant adults to safely consume rich animal dairy proteins.
Adding specific animal enzymes, applying heat, and forcefully draining the remaining liquids soon produced solid cheese blocks. Creating primitive aged cheese successfully eliminated nearly all remaining lactose, unlocking a revolutionary new human food source. Archaeologists recently discovered ancient milk fat residue trapped inside old pottery fragments across several distant global regions. These fascinating ancient fragments trace back nearly 9,000 years throughout Turkey, Eastern Europe, and Saharan Africa. These highly inventive ancient people were completely avoiding straight milk and actively transforming it into manageable foods.
Early cheese was absolutely never some gourmet treat, but rather a brilliant biochemical workaround for early humanity. This incredibly clever processing safely bypassed a severe biological limitation that every single adult human previously shared.
That incredibly simple early workaround immediately transformed the fundamental economics of agricultural farming virtually overnight across societies.
Harvesting an animal directly for meat provides essential food value precisely one single time during its lifespan. However, consistently keeping cattle alive for regular milking provides sustainable daily nourishment steadily for many long years.
A perfectly healthy herd of goats could easily sustain an entire human family throughout challenging lean seasons.
Managed dairy animals suddenly became incredible renewable food sources whenever vital agricultural grain harvests inevitably completely failed. Early farming communities quickly gained a massive survival advantage that compounded significantly across multiple successive human generations. While basic early fermentation remained a clever workaround, the truly massive genetic shift was actually still approaching.
This particular monumental impending change completely altered the human genome itself in ways absolutely nobody ever expected.
Somewhere among the northern grasslands, approximately 7,500 years ago, a massive genetic accident occurred. A totally random single-point mutation mysteriously appeared directly near the crucial LCT gene on chromosome 2. Incredibly, swapping just one single tiny nucleotide among billions of base pairs suddenly produced absolutely extraordinary results. This incredibly unique mutation successfully kept the human body continually producing lactase enzymes completely straight into adulthood. Nearly every terrestrial mammal is biologically programmed to rapidly cease this specific enzymatic production directly following weaning. However, this specific individual miraculously retained the remarkable ability to safely drink raw milk forever without issue. They could easily consume enormous quantities of fresh milk throughout their entire lifetime, experiencing absolutely zero discomfort. Under totally normal historical circumstances, an entirely random biological mutation like this would have meant absolutely nothing. Genetic mutations happen constantly, typically offering zero distinct advantages before quietly disappearing from the overall gene pool. However, this very specific biological adaptation miraculously appeared perfectly timed within an actively developing ancient farming community.
These agricultural groups were already routinely keeping vast animal herds, guaranteeing regular daily access to fresh milk.
The rare individual carrying this mutation suddenly unlocked an incredibly dense and highly reliable continuous nutritional source.
They enjoyed exclusive access to crucial calories, rich fat, essential protein, and vital hydration nobody else possessed. Imagine enduring a severe environmental drought when community wells ran completely dry and local grain crops withered. During brutally harsh winters, diminishing stored food supplies frequently caused severe communal hardship and widespread physical decline.
Anyone digesting raw milk instantly without waiting for lengthy fermentation processes held an absolutely enormous survival advantage.
Where should I put this one? Over there.
Yes, please, right next to the others. You make that look easy.
I'm faster than you! No, you're not. Wait up. I'm gonna beat you both.
Those thriving, fortunate children consistently maintained a strong 50% statistical probability of inheriting this identical mutation. Natural evolutionary selection aggressively grabbed hold of this advantageous biological mutation, rapidly amplifying it with astonishing speed. Geneticists estimate that lifelong lactase persistence historically spread throughout certain populations faster than almost any human adaptation. This extremely rapid biological expansion easily rivals powerful localized survival traits like innate malaria resistance across Africa. Within just a few short millennia, one isolated individual essentially birthed the defining characteristic of entire civilizations.
This rapid genetic spread was entirely intentional because it closely followed the expanding pathways of managed herds.
Around 5 millennia ago, nomadic pastoralist groups occupied.
Originating near modern Ukraine, these mobile Yamnaya people fundamentally initiated humanity's most deeply...
The Yamnaya were dedicated dairy pastoralists, maintaining massive cattle herds and frequently drinking fresh milk during travels. A highly significant percentage of this mobile ancestral population carried that exact unique lactase persistence genetic mutation. Being exceptionally mobile and technologically advanced, these organized nomadic groups possessed domesticated horses and early wheeled carts. Needing vast new pasture lands constantly, they expanded forcefully westward directly into Europe and eastward towards Central Asia. These powerful migrations actively introduced their unique language, advanced culture, domestic cattle, and crucial dairy genes everywhere.
Recent comprehensive genetic studies published over 15 years have completely rewritten our overall understanding of European prehistory.
Ancient DNA samples extracted directly from prehistoric burial sites prove their profound genetic contribution to modern Europeans.
Modern genetics reveal their massive legacy, sometimes providing half the total ancestry across northern Western European populations. Indigenous Neolithic farmers who originally established early European agricultural communities were absolutely never completely replaced or destroyed.
Instead, these ancient populations deeply intermixed, absorbing new traits and becoming genetically reshaped across the entire continent. The powerful Yamnaya nomads fundamentally transformed ancient Europe completely, simultaneously introducing their critical daily milk consumption habits.
This historic migration explains exactly why the modern global map mapping human lactose tolerance makes perfect sense.
Examining comprehensive global charts detailing modern lactase persistence rates practically reveals this fascinating evolutionary story completely alone. Northern Europeans descend directly from populations heavily mixing with migrating Yamnaya nomads throughout bitterly cold, dark winters.
Because historic dairy provided their only reliable winter food, they maintain the highest planetary lactose tolerance rates.
Throughout Scandinavia, the Netherlands, and the British Isles, over 90% safely digest milk completely without problems.
Moving directly south into Mediterranean Europe, where historic farming heavily favored grains, tolerance rates drop toward half.
Across vast regions spanning East Asia, Central Africa, and indigenous Australia, adult lactose tolerance remains incredibly rare.
In fact, among many prominent indigenous American populations today, natural lactase persistence rates frequently approach absolute zero.
This widespread variation never involved simple personal choice or cultural habits, remaining entirely driven by pure genetics. Populations consistently herding dairy animals over thousands of consecutive years successfully evolved specific genetic abilities or consuming dairy. Ancient civilizations primarily surviving upon abundant rice harvests or fresh fish simply never required this unique adaptation. Consequently, adult lactose intolerance represents absolutely no medical condition nor any biological disorder within the human body. Using digestive enzymes completely remains the standard, completely original biological default setting for every normal human adult. Adult lactose tolerance actually represents the freak biological mutation, though modern dominant global food systems normalize it. Surprisingly, migrating Yamnaya nomads were absolutely never the only ancient humans stumbling upon this magnificent biological trick. This incredibly specific, fascinating detail remained entirely unacknowledged and completely missed by modern scientific researchers for decades. Functionally equivalent genetic mutations achieving identical biological dairy digestion successfully evolved independently across 5 distinct global populations.
Dedicated pastoral groups throughout East Africa developed entirely separate lactase persistence variations, sustaining their deep cattle traditions. Resilient populations occupying the harsh Arabian Peninsula successfully developed yet another entirely distinct regional genetic digestive variant.
Because these specific mutations occurred independently upon different chromosomes, they were absolutely never inherited from common ancestors. Human evolution literally invented identical physiological solutions addressing shared agricultural problems through completely separate random genetic accidents. Evolutionary biologists proudly call this remarkable process convergent evolution, showcasing powerfully vital evidence regarding historic dairy consumption. Drinking raw milk offered survival advantages so enormous that natural selection independently repeated this incredibly successful trick. Following Yamnaya expansions and simultaneously developing African dairy cultures, early global agricultural conditions temporarily appeared somewhat settled. Prospering dairy communities beautifully wove milk, fresh cheese, and rich butter directly into their daily economic lives. However, such peaceful agricultural stability never lasted very long before dynamic, changing historical forces disrupted early societies. Ancient Sumerians occupying Mesopotamia proudly left heavily inscribed clay tablets describing intricate dairy production using remarkable detail.
Detailed ancient temple records from roughly 4 millennia ago list highly valued dairy goods strictly managed daily.
Beyond providing simple daily nourishment, valuable dairy products served explicitly as foundational currency and truly sacred wealth. Beautifully preserved Sumerian art powerfully displays ancient figures rhythmically milking large cattle directly into massive stone vessels. Some prominent historical scholars fiercely argue that ancient temples exclusively maintained specialized cattle breeds demanding higher milk.
Ancient Egyptian tomb paintings from the glorious Old Kingdom perfectly depict vivid domestic milking scenes featuring cattle.
Carefully preserved large cheese rounds were thoughtfully placed inside dark tombs, spiritually sustaining departed ancestral souls forever.
Elite ancient Egyptians clearly took their magnificent dairy products incredibly seriously, confidently bringing them directly into eternity.
Modern scientific researchers at the prestigious University of Catania eventually generated massive international media headlines discovering secrets.
Researchers eventually identified what represents the oldest known solid cheese hidden inside a vast Egyptian burial tomb.
Dating back roughly over 3,000 years, this remarkable solid cheese survived perfectly intact, deep, completely underground. Preserved beautifully by intensely dry desert air, it remarkably still carried microscopic traces of original forming bacteria. Meanwhile, halfway across our ancient world, dairy played an incredibly critical role building massive global military empires. 13th century Mongol armies directly commanded by famous leader Genghis Khan essentially operated as dairy-powered machines. Fierce Mongol soldiers traveled extensively alongside massive herds, surviving primarily upon highly nutritious fermented raw mare milk. They also consistently consumed hardened, dried curds, securely carried inside tough leather pouches tied across their saddles.
An impressive Mongol warrior could easily ride forward for multiple consecutive days without stopping for traditional meals.
Warriors maintained extreme momentum by simply reconstituting dried curds using water or drinking fermented dairy on horseback. This remarkably efficient dairy-based logistics system provided Mongol cavalry units unmatched speed and massive operational range. These highly mobile armies completely eliminated any absolute necessity for dragging slow supply trains or bulky bakeries. Their vital living food sources simply rode directly alongside them, demonstrating what many considered pure military genius. This highly aggressive, self-sustaining mobility proved profoundly intimidating whenever facing opposing forces directly within their path. For thousands of ancient years across vast Egyptian lands toward Mongolian steppes, dairy remained fundamentally highly localized. Farmers personally milked their specific local livestock, either drinking fresh liquids immediately or actively processing primitive cheeses. Every single domestic animal and local consumer existed comfortably nearby, maintaining beautifully simple agricultural food supply chains. Eventually, the massive industrial revolution abruptly transformed dairy from being humanity's absolutely safest traditional rural agricultural food.
It shockingly became one of the most uniquely hazardous consumer products available within rapidly expanding modern cities.
During the early 1800s, multiple major cities across America and widespread Europe experienced massive population explosions.
Countless factory jobs quickly pulled millions away from expansive farms directly into highly cramped, crowded urban neighborhoods.
These disconnected new city dwellers possessed entirely zero pastures or personal cows, yet continually demanded fresh milk.
Unfortunately, distant rural dairy farms completely struggled producing and successfully transporting sufficient quantities satisfying intense urban demand.
Consequently, an incredibly desperate and notably hazardous new commercial industry rapidly emerged, attempting to supply urban gaps. Dubbed distillery dairies, these grimly efficient whiskey-producing operations consistently generated massive quantities involving leftover grain mash.
This severely acidic and highly depleted hot agricultural byproduct eventually became commonly known simply as dangerous swill.
Instead of responsibly paying disposal fees, clever distillery owners realized they could cheaply feed this substandard waste.
They aggressively packed numerous dairy cows securely inside completely unventilated sheds, situated directly alongside active distillery floors. Subjected to incredibly poor, unhygienic conditions, these unfortunate confined animals consumed nothing except entirely unnatural industrial slop. Lacking proper grazing environments and healthy sunshine, the severe urban confinement caused widespread dramatic physiological health declines. These highly unnatural factory settings forced struggling animals completely past their normal physical limits, extracting commercial yields.
Consequently, the resulting dairy product appeared entirely pale and alarmingly thin, harboring severely dangerous concealed environmental contaminants. Attempting to deceptively mask this terrible quality, deceitful producers frequently added literal white chalk, improving visual appearances. They shockingly utilized thick plaster, heavy flour, and incredibly sweet molasses, masking awful tastes from unsuspecting buyers.
Street vendors aggressively peddle this highly adulterated, hazardous liquid directly from completely open containers throughout residential neighborhoods.
Hard-working, innocent urban families tragically purchase these dangerous hidden mixtures, possessing absolutely no awareness regarding actual origins.
During the 1850s, heavily populated New York neighborhoods unknowingly consuming this product experienced severe public crises. Countless young urban residents tragically succumbed annually toward aggressive broad sicknesses, completely baffling confused contemporary medical professionals. Hispanic doctors broadly diagnosed extensive terrible bacterial illnesses directly stemming straight from unknowingly ingesting highly contaminated urban dairy. Historical estimates officially attribute thousands of tragic urban losses strictly toward distributing entirely unregulated, dangerous dairy supplies. Famed investigative journalist Frank Leslie forcefully launched widespread landmark public investigations during 1858 publishing exposés. His highly controversial weekly newspaper effectively utilized incredibly graphic custom illustrations deeply exposing horrific hidden industrial realities. Public drawings depicted intensely unsanitary processing environments and completely unsafe public consumption cycles happening across entire neighborhoods. Understandably furious citizens demanded reform, though corrupt dairy industries notoriously maintained incredibly deep defensive urban political connections. Establishing properly meaningful health regulation ultimately required several long decades of intensely exhausting, continuous legal political fighting. Furthermore, this exact same severely compromised liquid actively accelerated widespread devastating outbreaks involving multiple deeply infectious pathogens. Unregulated urban milk simply represented the absolute most dangerous daily consumer product throughout 19th century industrialized societies.
Drink this, child. It will make you strong.
I cannot, Father. Please.
However, spectacular historical breakthroughs suddenly arrived unexpectedly when brilliant French chemist Louis Pasteur began deeply studying fermentation.
Pasteur famously dedicated vast scientific efforts toward actively understanding exactly why commercial wine supplies frequently spoiled unpredictably.
Through careful experimentation inside his laboratory, he discovered heating liquids killed harmful bacteria responsible for rapid spoilage.
This controlled heating process preserved fundamental liquid characteristics and originally developed strictly benefiting the commercial wine industry.
Applying this brilliant process toward dairy seemed incredibly obvious, yet commercial adoption remained agonizingly and painfully slow.
Stubborn dairy producers aggressively fought pasteurization because it required purchasing expensive new equipment, drastically increasing operating costs.
Several misguided physicians strongly opposed pasteurization, incorrectly believing heating destroyed essential vital nutrients naturally present inside dairy.
Furthermore, many traditional medical professionals completely rejected germ theory, finding invisible disease organisms highly controversial and unbelievable.
During those challenging decades, heavy resistance appeared everywhere, until American businessman Nathan Strauss powerfully entered the narrative. After tragically watching countless local children succumb toward contaminated dairy, this wealthy department store owner took action.
Strauss generously funded specialized pasteurized milk depots using personal wealth throughout deeply impoverished urban New York neighborhoods.
Here's the fresh batch.
Thank you kindly. They look wonderful.
He eventually opened 8 facilities across New York, rapidly dropping infant mortality rates by incredibly dramatic margins. The comprehensive scientific data became completely undeniable, proving unequivocally that clean milk saved countless vulnerable human lives. His relentless national advocacy pushed conversations forward, forcing most major American cities toward enacting mandatory pasteurization laws.
By 1920, pasteurization finally became the legal standard, completely transforming dairy into a safe industrial commodity.
Safely bottled inside glass, milk traveled hundreds of miles aboard refrigerated rail cars for enormous commercial sales. The modern global dairy industry was rapidly born, quickly becoming absolutely inseparable from the modern American identity.
Government-funded public nutrition campaigns aggressively treated dairy as one fundamentally essential food group for growing children.
Massive dairy advertisements heavily saturated television broadcasts, while the industry became incredibly subsidized by federal agricultural sectors.
Supported strictly by massive federal price supports, industry marketing boards spent hundreds of millions of dollars annually.
During 1993, two simple words completely redefined modern food marketing for an entire generation everywhere.
This incredibly famous advertising campaign rapidly became one of history's absolute most instantly recognizable modern commercial slogans.
Countless famous celebrities, talented athletes, and popular musicians constantly appeared everywhere wearing that iconic white milk mustache.
Their simple message aggressively blanketed every available media channel, boldly claiming that milk built exceptionally strong bones.
However, the actual biological science underlying those massive commercial health claims remained considerably more complicated than advertised.
Multiple massive epidemiological scientific studies eventually revealed that relationships connecting dairy consumption alongside bone health remained complex.
One massive Harvard health study tracking thousands found zero significant associations between higher milk intake and fractures. Surprisingly, countries displaying massive per capita dairy consumption frequently reported the highest global osteoporosis and fracture rates. That perfectly clean commercial narrative, heavily promoted by dairy industries, simply failed surviving rigorous modern scientific scrutiny. Simultaneously, growing widespread global awareness regarding adult lactose intolerance began fundamentally reshaping every modern conversation surrounding dairy.
Statistically, almost exactly 65% of adult humans alive today cannot properly digest natural lactose sugars.
Throughout major East Asian countries, alongside vast African and Latin American communities, intolerance rates climb significantly higher. For the overwhelming majority of modern humanity, casually drinking raw milk guarantees incredibly severe, uncomfortable digestive misery. Western assumptions declaring dairy a universal health food represented cultural projections of one highly specific genetic adaptation. That commercial assumption was absolutely never an accurate biological truth, reflecting the entire global human species collectively. The massive, sudden commercial rise of modern plant-based milk alternatives powerfully reflected and accelerated this shift. Massive varieties of alternative milks rapidly flooded grocery shelves, quickly pushing oat production toward massive global valuations. Prominent global coffee shops eventually stocked significantly more diverse non-dairy alternatives than traditional cow milk products. Formerly niche products designed for intolerant individuals exploded into massive mainstream categories driven by shifting modern tastes. Traditional dairy industries aggressively fought back, spending millions lobbying against plant-based products utilizing the word milk.
Desperately arguing consumer confusion, traditional industries sparked massive legal battles spanning international courtrooms regarding specific packaging terminology.
Determining exactly what legally constituted commercial milk became a massively expensive and highly intense global regulatory war.
However, beneath all those fierce modern regulatory fights, the incredibly profound, deeper evolutionary biological story remains unchanged.
Human dairy consumption represents a massive 10,000-year ongoing evolutionary experiment between early humans and livestock.
This highly unique genetic ability was systematically earned across hundreds of struggling generations by specific desperate populations. Their dangerous survival bet paid off so dramatically it permanently rewrote the genetic codes of billions alive. The massive modern global dairy industry successfully produces roughly 930 million metric tons annually today. Despite thousands of distinct cultural cheese varieties existing today, the fundamental underlying human biology remains entirely unchanged. The vast majority of adult humans walking this planet are still completely genetically intolerant to raw lactose. This incredibly specific genetic mutation remains heavily concentrated strictly within those exact same ancient descendant herding populations. Milk remains absolutely extraordinary because it represents a living historical record etched perfectly into human genetic chromosomes. Every single glass consumed by tolerant adults echoes a random genetic accident inside a nameless pastoral community. That random prehistoric accident miraculously arrived at precisely the right historical moment among perfectly positioned ancient populations. It rapidly snowballed into humanity's absolute fastest and most profoundly far-reaching evolutionary adaptation across human history. Ancient Yamnaya herders migrating steadily across European steppes could absolutely never have imagined modern trillion-dollar industries. Ancient Sumerian priests methodically tallying butter rations upon clay tablets could never picture massive modern refrigerated trucks. Even prominent historical philanthropists distributing pasteurized milk heavily throughout impoverished urban neighborhoods never predicted modern oat lattes. However, every single momentous historical event remains tightly connected through one continuous thread stretching back 10 millennia. Our brilliant species completely overcame severe genetic limitations, fundamentally rebuilding entire massive civilizations around one biological choice. What truly survives this historical narrative is never petty modern commercial debates regarding alternative plant-based beverages.
Surviving evidence remains permanently written inside human chromosomes, proving anonymous ancient herders irreversibly changed global human history. The famous evolutionary liquid that rewrote human DNA continues pouring endlessly today. It merely looks different now.
If this historical documentary revealed completely new, incredible perspectives, please subscribe and share your favorite surprising moments.